This.
Hello, Gordon.
Hello, Brett. Welcome to the DIY Toycast episode, I guess two, since this is our second official one. We're doing this classic style where it's just you and I talking about uh, the 413 Indie Toy Fest that we just were at. But first, do you want to kick it off maybe just with what we've been working on since the show?
Yeah, this is the post-show pickup corner. We'll probably get into the toy stuff. I'm currently working on Orbix, who I have none on hand to display, as they were all sold out at the show to children, which, hey, that rules. Really thankful some kids picked those up. But yeah, that'll probably be the big thing moving forward this week. We will probably be looking at a figure drop tonight on the cartel shop of mine. I will have a few ooze clops that were
Nice.
some overhold from the summer project for Toy Pizza Expo.
Yeah, and I
That
I got one of those in hand right here.
there he is. Yeah, for our visual
Right.
listeners, there's the ooze clops. And for those of you that don't know, he's just a big slime monster that you can pin cushion a bunch of swords or lightsabers into.
Right. And so
So
like here's like a sword that I got. And so Brett has put various size slots throughout the sculpt. I think there's like one right here in the front. And you can get all sorts of different size weapons. This is meant for, figures from the size of 1/18th scale, like Star Wars stuff, to Mythic Legion stuff, or like McFarlane stuff, or even Super 7 Ultimates, anything in
yes.
that scale.
Yes, and side little tangent here. Speaking of Super 7 Ultimates, I am now a Super 7 brand affiliate. So, as outrageous as that is to say, we'll have my link in the show notes so you can help the pod to keep the lights on and make me a little bit of money in my toy making journey. And hopefully, we can get some stuff sold through that I can start offering discounts. So,
Yeah,
shout out to Super 7 and Brian Flynn for hooking me up with that. Pretty sick.
very
But
cool.
beyond Orbix, that's really all I have going. And for those of you that tuned into the last episode, you saw the prototype. But he should be coming. Show post-show pre-orders for that will be live the weekend of the 17th, this Friday. I'm looking to shoot to have those. But anyway, Gordon, what have you been up to since the show?
Well, I've been trying to move a lot of my overstock, and I actually sent you back with some, including, I think, both one of the Hero Gladiator colorways of the cursed armor. So the one with the blue axe, and then sort of the purple and aquamarine color split. And then I know you have one of the classic ones as well, which is that gold and metallic purple. And then I did I send you back with one of these guys, the vampires? I
No,
can't
I do not have
remember.
a Vampire
Okay.
Lord in that scale. I will, but for those of you that are interested in grabbing something from Gordon through me, I will have two 118 scale 5 POA. There will be a classic,
That's
the
right.
new hero colorway with the aquamarine and teal, and then I will have a 6-inch scale classic cursed armor as well that's hyper articulated with the disc joint system. So those will all be up tonight, hopefully, after the show.
Oh
And we
yeah.
are recording on 10/13. So anyone listening to this, they might already be sold.
And I'm still trying to figure out the whole online shop business, but like if you message me directly through Instagram or if you're on the Toy Pizza Discord, happy to do business that way. I got a bunch of stuff. I got, this guy, the Gar, which is translucent orange with a gold overspray. I still got one of my deluxe Horse sets, the neon pink with aquamarine saddle that comes with one of these articulated Mantessa figures to ride it.
And that is a 118 hyper articulated figure, right?
Right, right.
Very cool. Yeah, that is so garish and 90s neon. It's perfect.
I mean, and I talked to a couple people at the show who came by. You know, I love my dark fantasy aesthetic with the
Yeah.
original colors, but
Oh, I do too, and that's why I was so happy to get one of the new Spectres from
oh hell
you.
yeah,
This This is the Vampire Lord sculpt of Gordon's. He just did a material style. So it's just flat black torso and limbs with a glow in the dark resin Vampire Lord head with a dark wash and then a hyper green translucent axe. So this is very much reminiscent of the Hades colorway from Onell design with a little less color and a
Oh, I
little
didn't even
more,
think of that.
yeah, and a
Yeah,
little more viciousness. But for brand purposing and not ripping off Matt completely, we're going to call that Spectre and not Hades. So
right.
yeah. But no, that one rules.
Yeah, and other than that, our good friend Derek, who was on the pod last time, sent us each a copy of his new figure that he's done with Kenneth West. The I think Sidewinder is the working name
Yes.
of this
Yeah,
guy.
the Sidewinder. Yeah, very much informed by Manta Force as we had discussed.
Yeah,
And we both got one in a very striking orange and ruby red with a beautiful wash on that. And the skin tone he did was absolutely miraculous.
yeah.
So if you
Derek's paintwork is incredible.
Yeah, so if anyone's interested in hyper detailed resin figures, definitely be in touch with DSN 1014.
Yeah,
And we're going to link all this in the show notes if anyone's trying to
right.
and be interested in us hawking our wares.
And so related, Derek was kind enough to share the sculpt that Kenneth West, another friend of the pod, Circus Tents on YouTube, had done for him. And so I tried running a couple in TPU. So these things are, as flexible as production plastic, and using the peg and socket system that other Glyos figures use, you can do weird things like take the arm off, plug in the
Put the waist on
waist,
the arm, and then he has ass hands.
right? Or you could even make like some sort of horrible human centipede type thing, I'm sure,
Yeah,
if I went and found another switch pin.
multi arms, and he's quickly turning into Goro from Mortal Kombat.
Right. Or Modulok from
Yeah, from O2.
He-Man. So
Yeah, yeah, very excellent. It's really cool to see the love of TPU jump up after the show.
yeah, and I that actually sort of nicely transitions into something I wanted to focus a little bit with you on, Brett, which is you got some very excellent customers, which were their dads and their kids, picking up their stuff. There was that dude who I guess had spent some time in Japan,
Yeah,
being an
what a wild tale. This
I,
guy comes up, his kid is the same age as mine, and is just absolutely jazzed about the giant 6-inch kaiju fighting robot that I brought to the show in Royal Hyper Blue. And yeah, he had recanted the tale of him being in the armed forces around the time of the Afghan War in the early aughts, and had did time as an English teacher in Japan shortly after, and was on set doing English translation work and doing kaiju fighting in the suit. Very, very wild stuff, but super cool. Was extremely hyped to pick some of my stuff up for his son, which ruled because I think it's so much cooler that I'm making toys that kids like instead of sweaty 50-year-old men that want hyperarticulation.
I mean, it also means that maybe the hobby will be around in some form in 10, 20 years if
Right,
like these
right,
kids, it may be a diminishing number or who knows, but like this is the only way that the stuff that we like will continue in any form is if we encourage other people to get into it.
right. And it helps facilitate an imagination when there's not a lot of that on the shelves. And I can that can turn into a pretty cynical conversation pretty quickly. But in lieu of not going down that avenue, was just very thankful that 3 out of the 4 Orbix I did sell. I mean, I only brought 4 up, and 3 of them went within the first hour and a half to kids. So that was really, really sick. So I would say the majority of stuff went to kids, which was very much what I was looking to do.
Mhm.
But I was still shocked. Usually there's a large adult, contingency at these types of shows. So for them to roll through and see so many kids really delighted me. I'm a dad. I've always loved children, so
Yeah.
it's awesome to see kids be interested in my stuff. And I think the garish neon color choices I have and really soft sculpts helps with that. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, it was also awesome to be one of the tables that had stuff that was priced to kids because
Yeah,
soft vinyl collectibles, they're pretty they can be normally pretty price, you know,
prohibitive. Yeah.
extremely prohibitive for the child market.
Right. Unless, and I actually have some stuff here on the table. So, originally in the 70s, when, various Ultraman stuff was coming out, like this would be the equivalent of, I don't know, like $5 or something. But,
Right.
it would have been like the Kenner Swamp Thing stuff that I was showing you of, this is, you can wing it around, it has some sort of cool play feature,
Hmm.
actually, if you think about it, relatively similar paint thing where shot in a single color, overspray over the top, and then just the eyes are picked out with red.
Right.
And and then sort of similar stuff would be done with these mass-produced Godzilla, Ultraman monsters where, shot in an interesting, colorful color that attracts a kid's eye. You
Right.
know, they have these sort of uh it's not screen accurate proportions. They're stylized and softened, so they're a little bit cutesy, but also structurally hold up to rougher play. If a kid isn't doesn't have the hand-eye coordination to pose a hyper-articulated action figure, he can just pick it up by the arm, the head, the leg, and move it around.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, a lot of people don't love that cutesy aesthetic of, it's not as far as like Japanese Gundam where it's like it's to the SD style stuff, super deformed, but I think that's kind of taking everything down a little less specific, softening some of it, making his eyes a little bit bigger. I think it really is a lot more inviting to the mass market of, kids of all ages, and then the opposite sex too, where men really gravitate towards a hyper articulated, hardcore type figure nowadays. And I think having something, like they were doing original vinyl in the 70s helps attract everybody to the table. And I think the hobby needs more of that. We were talking about very simple color schemes. I had picked up the Mud Belly here
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
from Garden State Kaiju, and I'm born in '93, so Power of the Force 2 was my Star Wars. But I've always appreciated what Kenner did in the '70s, and I love the work of Stephen Geddes. He did. Everyone knows his legacy, but his sculpt on this is incredible. And he did all the sculpt work for all of Healy Made's Glyos figures too, that I'm a big fan of. So it was really cool to finally meet Roger in person and pick up one of these in the matching original Kenner Dubak green. But I really like this. It fits in the hand nicely. You can give it to a kid and it's playable and it's not covered in paint where you're worried about shipping. And
Right.
I think more pocket size sotheby is very much what the hobby needs. But I'm far from an expert, and I'm sure some armchair experts will fight me in the street after this. So
Although you made some good connections with the up and coming maker Mosquito Toy Works, Max, right? And I
yes,
feel like
yes.
his stuff is very much in that lane with those. It's almost like the dinosaur toys. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. What Max is doing is exactly what I want to see in vinyl. And I'm not a big vinyl head by any stretch of the imagination, but the stuff he's doing is so fun and it's cartoony and it's almost like it's got that Remco look, like the
mhm.
off-brand Battle Cat or some of the colorways he's done. They're
Yeah.
very much original 70s and 80s, but some of them remind me of the Imperial Knights, armors, and dragons stuff that was in the early 80s that was
Okay.
He-Man adjacent,
Mhm.
like the two-headed beast thing with the saddle and those
Oh
like
yeah,
just
I know what you're
what
talking about.
yeah, what he's doing with those, I just really love those. So getting to talk with him and hopefully getting one of my things into USA made vinyl might be a possibility we're looking at. I don't want to get their hopes up, most of all me.
Mhm.
But if nothing else, it was super awesome to see Max again and talk to him about, how that's working. And it's really cool to see someone up and coming and younger just throwing vinyl in a garage somewhere in the Northeast that's, not paying an arm and a leg overseas. Because I don't think that's going to be going on too much longer with the tariff situation.
Yeah, we'll see where things shake out, but it is nice to have, you know, uh, these different manufacturing skill pockets like more geographically close than halfway around the world.
Oh, of course. And it really, I mean, just for the conversation aspect, there's not a language barrier or even a time zone barrier. We're
mhm,
East Coast, so we can all, we're all up at the same time. So that's pretty fantastic. But yeah, I got getting to chat with him and Jake of Tank Dino 4749 Designs fame, who hosted the show. If you're
mhm.
listening, Jake, thank you for putting on a fantastic time for all of us and giving me an excuse to come up to New England.
Yeah, thank you, Jake.
Yeah, that it was a fantastic day, and getting to see his collection and everything at the after party was absolutely stellar. So,
Holy
but
shit,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it rolled. But getting to talk with him and what he has plans for production and things, it really inspiring. Gave me a lot of hope to what can be done here stateside
Mhm.
and what is going to continue to be done by the independents like us that are, relatively unknown. And I kind of like it that way. But, as we see prices, we just saw price hikes over at Comic-Con in the past week. And if anyone's paid attention to that, where Hasbro's announced that Star Wars Vintage Collection is going to go from 16.99 to 19.99, which that's insane to me. I mean, how
Mhm.
many Star Wars figures can we buy at this price? Not many. So hearing that guys are going to be taking more production into their own hands here stateside is such a breath of fresh air.
Mhm. No, and very quickly, if you're buying whatever you just said, 30 or $40 Marvel Legends, that adds up to a $300 3D printer that lets you print 100 action figures for, pennies on the dime.
Of course, and you're going to run into some diminishing returns, and especially you know, if you're not an engineer by it, and not familiar with these articulation schemes and stuff, you're gonna beat your head against the wall when you get into this. But there's people out there that are doing it and doing it well and having fun. And I think that is more important to the hobby than you buying your 57th Wolverine.
Yeah, and also like the sea of knowledge out there is vast and like, there are people like Jacob Sanchez who's out there doing, absolutely incredible hyper articulated 1/18th scale figures.
No, I mean
Um,
his sculpts are insane. I mean, this is on par with Joy Toy or Acid Rain articulation.
right. Yeah. And so, back to the I guess sturdiness versus articulation, like to me this is engineered as a photography model or draw like a reference for drawing
Right.
versus, Swamp Thing here who's engineered to
To throw the mace and swing the arm.
yeah, to throw hands at, the the evil unmen. And something that I feel like the older simplified 5POA sculpts that let Kenner do a wider variety of molds and body types. So here are like the three of the bad guys from Swamp Thing, all different heights, slightly different posture and poses. Whereas by having the uh, engineering for the basic buck for a Marvel Legend be so complex, that means you're sort of locked into that form factor mostly.
Right.
They've gradually been expanding their library where they have like, a beefier dude and like the Spider-Man body. And, I guess now the female figures have double jointed elbows or something, but still the range of I don't know, body types is still relatively small compared to you look at the old Kenner Star Wars figures and like there's some seriously wild shit between like Snaggletooth or a Jawa and you know uh one of the stormtroopers or Luke.
Oh yeah, and and you were talking about when Kenner got into that 5-inch scale with Swamp Thing, and that's the early '90s.
Yeah.
If you fast forward, just a couple years when we get to Kenner's Total Justice line,
Oh yeah.
those are the most absurd sculpts ever, and they're so stylized, and they're starting to really having to compete with McFarlane
Right.
sculpts, but they're still super fun and they're so sturdy.
Hmm.
And I think you can do a lot with less articulation, and you can have a lot more fun. And I love more stylized stuff. I always have. But you were so kind as to gift me the Gator fella from Bucky O'Hare
Yeah.
over the weekend. And this thing has just been a joy for me to fiddle around with, and my son too, of course. But this is Hasbro's one of their many attempts to fight Playmates.
Oh, it's
And
so that has a
it
Hasbro stamp on the
yes,
bottom?
there's no stamp. I had to look it up. I had looked
Oh,
everywhere
wow.
for it. But yeah,
Okay.
I looking at the sculpt, I would have just gunned to my head, assumed it was Playmates because it reminds me so much of the Turtles.
Mhm.
But I think that sensibility you can get with these big chunky sculpts, and you're still getting wrist articulation, you have a tail to spin around and such, but you know, there's so much detail done into these bodies, and even the spots that aren't covered in detail, they're just fun to hold.
Yeah.
I don't know, like if you hand me a turtle from 88 through 2005, I can probably close my eyes and hold it and be like, oh, this is one of this, or this is so and so. Or, you can feel the teeth with your eyes closed and be like, oh, this is probably Donnie. But if you give me a Marvel Legend with no head from, I don't know, 2012 till modern day, and it doesn't have claws on it, it could be anybody from Vulcan to somebody from X-Force to some Spider-Man villain. I mean, it's just there's so much of it that's not unique. And a
Mhm.
lot of my stuff has mirroring and reuse in it as the robots, but everything feels very, very soulless to me, especially after seeing all these insane and wicked sculpts at 413 Fest. And some of the stuff guys are doing in vinyl just completely upended my brain. I mean, I've just been down a rabbit hole since I got back.
Yeah, and I mean the you can still get there with digital stuff. You just got to put in sort of
Oh,
the
no,
extra work.
no question. I mean, look at the cursed armor. Look what you've done with Mantessa. Look at anything, Gordon here's putting out. The cursed armor arguably has more detail in it than a lot of Hasbro stuff, or even McFarlane's modern stuff. I mean, just the sculpt that you've engineered into this is crazy, and like the chainmail on it and the scale effects are it's bewildering, even with FDM at 118 scale. So it's doable, folks. It's very doable.
And I think that's what like I get a lot of inspiration from companies that are producing outside the US. So while after the show, I immediately spent most of what I made on a new Blockies kit of Ava Unit 03 from the movies. And to do the engineering on this sort of stuff, it's all digital. But again, something that I admire greatly with what Blockies are doing with, both their smaller Transformer figures, which are great for kids, but also with their larger kits, is they focus on the ability that you can actually like move and pose the thing without breaking it or having parts fall off. So even though this is sort of sold as an unassembled model kit, you end up with what is the equivalent of like a playable, SHF figure arts figure for a good maybe two-thirds to half of the price.
Yeah, and if you're interested in such things, you also get the privilege to getting to build it, which I think is always half the fun with a good kit.
Right.
And
And
I think
I've taken a lot of the engineering ideas or solutions from seeing how things are put together.
Oh yeah, everything is ready to be cloned by us. But yeah, I mean, I also picked up a Blockies kit. I picked up one of the Three Kingdoms series they're doing,
Mhm.
the Chinese exclusive market. Luckily, Newberry Comics just had some, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So I got one of the little cheap $11 sets, and I threw that thing together Saturday night after the show, and I just had the best time. I
Mhm.
mean, it only took about 20 minutes or so. It was nothing. I took my time and was just, relaxing, listening to some music, doing it. But oh, what a blast. It's so fun. And I couldn't tell you the last time I had a model kit that I got done with and was like, oh man, I can actually mess around with this. It's not just going to live pre-posed on the shelf like something from Bandai.
And I would say that like that can be a potential avenue that's like an on-ramp to what Brett and I do of if you like building model kits, if you're a Glios collector and you like doing builds, all it takes is that next step of doing a custom head that you can incorporate into your model kit or your Glyos build or something, and then you gradually work your way up to, okay, well, can I make two custom parts that fit together? And then, okay, well, if I have like a uh, head that can fit into a torso, now can I put some limbs on it and get a full 5 POA figure out of it?
Right, and that's that snowball effect you get. I mean, it took us a while to get there. It certainly took me a minute to get there. This didn't happen overnight, but getting the just discovering TPU as a material coming off printing primarily with PLA and a little bit of PETG to mixed results early on. Once I figured out some of that early engineering for how the flex joint system works, it's so simple and easy and it's scalable where you don't have to do a 90-degree arm that can go either way. You can just stick that thing on there and make it 5 POA if you want, and you can use that as a joint system.
Mhm.
And if you're going to do a thicker figure, it's very simple. And the stuff's out there. If anyone's interested in this, I'm happy to give you these articulation schemes. I'm not making any money on these outside of the figures I make. It's just a hobby. There's no patents. So we're always down to encourage more people to create and less people to continue to buy from big corpo, unless it's, Super Seven, friend
Seven,
of the
yeah.
pod.
Please buy
Yes,
from Super Seven.
yes, support Super Seven that I get paid and get money. I'm going to be filthy rich after this. So thank you to Super Seven, friend of the pod. I've sold my soul to corpo overlords. But no, it
Yeah.
was it was it was very inspiring getting to see New England. I had never been up that way, and being up with Gordon for the weekend, us getting to talk shop about a lot of these projects has been really fantastic. But Gordon, since I've been gone and you've been free to actually get back to living your life without a roommate, what have you been? What's next on your project log? Have you had any epiphanies?
Yeah, well, we were messaging back and forth today about maybe me doing a uh, either more heroic knight or just sort of basic knight figure to go with the cursed armor. I'm very encouraged by this result of using full TPU on Kenneth's sculpt for Derek. Um,
Yeah.
I would love.
And that came out beautiful, by the way. I mean, it was actually kind of miraculous what's been able to happen, but
I was astounded. I I had told Brett that I also did a test where like I have a tile kitchen floor and I full force threw this at the floor as an angry 3-year-old might held up just fine. So I remember we have a mutual friend Jeff who has a young son about Brett's son's age who
yes.
very much likes to get his hands into things and play with them as a child would.
Yes,
And
Wolfman Jeff, friend of the pod.
friend of the pod. Um, and like resin stuff ain't so great if you're that age.
No,
Does
no,
not hold
certainly
up to
not.
play very well.
Certainly not.
So it would be great if we just had something that we could be like, yeah, hell yeah, here you go, kid.
Yeah,
Play with it as you will.
right. And I think a heroic knight would be super sick, and that gets, we're just constantly on the train of farming dungeon synth ideas for knights and fantasy stuff, which I would love to see you do a knight that's just a general troop builder. And you can always build onto it and do a heroic, Adonis style hair sculpt that's like the free flowing. But,
Mhm.
I want to see that Templar. I want to see the mace.
I
I'm
mean,
ready for it.
and the great thing about, the Glio system is like, here's one of Jesse DeStasio's guys. This is actually his like main character, Rex Gannon, from one of his most recent releases. But, I could take
Available now at toypizza.com.
I could take top of this and then we'll see if this works. Presumably it should. We should be able to take Derek's figure and just pop them together here. This is my first time doing this, so doing it live on camera.
Do it live.
Yeah,
There it
so
is.
I
It
might have
works.
to heat it up a little bit with a hair dryer. But this is sort of the core conceit of all the different makers using the form fit system that Onell uses is, you're not locked into what you'll purchase. You're given a set of paints to freely paint with as you will.
Right. And and I also think it speaks to the settings we worked up on your printer while I was up there that
Yeah,
you just took a TPU lower half that we had printed in your living room
right.
with settings I had just cooked up in my head that I have on retainer at all times. And it worked with a factory production piece right now. I mean, it's kind of miraculous what's able to be done. And this FlashForge printers, they're not super modern. I mean, that's like a 5-year-old system now. That it's basically the same belt-driven format of a Z-axis printer that's been out since right around the time the pandemic happened. So it's not cutting edge. They're really good systems. And they work, but it's not. They're affordable. This isn't like a $3,000 printer or anything. This
I
is a very entry level something him and I just picked up off of Amazon.
Right. And I was telling people at the show, it's essentially a glue gun mounted to a motor arm that's moving around as like there's a piece of heated metal that moves up and down on
Exactly.
a screw that moves it. And so you can see right there everything that's going on. And so that makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot of if there isn't stuff coming out of the, extruder, then you go get a pin and you jam
Yeah.
it until stuff comes out again.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. I mean, they can definitely be a little bit intimidating to get into, and resin certainly can be. As someone who
Yeah.
does resin with work, I do resin printing at my job. Um, and I did plenty of it at home prior to my Mars 2 going under. But, I'm having so much fun with the filament stuff. And
Mhm.
and the materials are getting better and better, the tech's getting better and better. And as we can see, it's the parts can match up with factory production stuff now. It's been done live right here. So, I think the sky's the limit with it. And that's just one type of articulation scheme.
Mhm.
You know, that varies completely differently than what I'm doing with my little TPU flex inserts, and completely different than something like what Jacob Sanchez of Desktop Vandals fame is doing with his polycap system. So
Right.
and I think all of these stand on their own. Obviously what Onell has done with Glyos has. And if anyone's listening to this and hasn't already got into it, get over to onelldesign.com, pre-order that new Wave 109, get all three of them, sell those out. They're doing an incredible crossover with Four Horsemen. Buy those figures. This is going to be the best one that Matt's ever did. No question. So get over there
Yeah.
and pick those up.
I'll definitely be posting the link into that. Brett and I would probably not have found this aspect of the hobby were it not for, the work of Matt and Marcus and everyone else at ONL Design. I will never forget that it was the first toy pizza that Matt like walked back with us from like
Yes, it
lunch or
was.
something, right?
Yes, we got done eating. We were going to back to your car to drop stuff off, and I was about I don't know 8 to 10 deep, and
Yeah.
it was very hot, and I was dehydrated. We had been drinking, and as we had walked with Matt, he was just imparting nothing but sage wisdom and the insight of an archmage from the 13th century, and it was very prophetic. And I think that him distilling all of that information to Gordon and I on that stroll basically supplanted what the destiny that Gordon and I are facing now as independent creators. I think that kind of set that into motion, and here we are.
Yeah, and we'll see if I remember to do it, but I'll also try to link the video that the Horseman did where they went and visited Matt at his house and Marcus and sort of got to see their workspace and stuff and basically give the backstory behind this collaboration because, it might not be apparent from looking at the outside, but they actually have very similar design philosophies of wanting to create figures that have a certain amount of modularity and customizability. And they've also, in sort of both their spheres, uh, really strongly encouraged this fan to maker pipeline and like customizer. And so a big part of both communities is sort of this creative aspect of, there's tons of people at Legion's on who set up with their 3D printed heads or custom soft goods or dioramas. Um, and then in the Glyos world, a lot of people, actually, I know PJ from Spaced Out Design started with 3D printing, right?
Yeah, I think he was doing some early FDM stuff, and I think that was that poly smooth system, similar to what David White, MechaZone, sculptor of some Super 7 work. I don't know who was doing it first, but they were both doing that. I don't own any of PG's early stuff. I'd love to get my hands on it. That stuff looks so sick.
Yeah, and across the pond, Sam from Angry Hedgehog Toys, who I actually met at Legion's Con, a lot of his early stuff was all 3D printed.
Right.
So, he's prototyping all this stuff. I didn't know if like, when he was making that stuff, was he just doing it as like, I'm going to prototype stuff and get it to the factory? Or my guess is more likely he had a period where he was just doing the 3D printed small batch runs, and that lets him, work out the kinks. And the thing is too, you don't have to give that up if you go into production. You can run a small batch custom heads if you want.
Well, exactly. We're seeing that right now with Marty Hansen, the God Beast, who's another Glios maker. I think he still has some of those flocked BioJumper heads
Hmm.
that him and Matt did years ago on the blog. I mean, this is almost a decade ago now. They had done sculpts for that. And he's got a small batch of resin heads out right now in conjunction with just a monolith of factory production figure stuff. So you know, if these guys in factories are doing it, it gives us a lot of hope that, the line of, oh, this is a prototype to this is what I consider to be a finished piece at this stage in my hobby or career, it's a lot more blurred. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, you recently got a starring role in the Action Figure of the Month Club. Actually, over the past two parcels, here I have Brett's contributions. So here is a hacker man with a FDM TPU rebreather that Brett did as part of it. And so, to go with the like underwater diver look, you know, you're almost completely altering the look of what the base figure would be without it, which is just sort of a heavy muscle dude in like one of those mechanics onesies.
Right.
To you actually you scan this figure to get the fit on the underside? Is that how you did this?
Yes, yeah, with Jesse's permission, of course. But
Right.
that's one of the big perks of my job is I have access to digital scanning. So I was able to upload the STL files, bring it in, and just do a relief cut on the underside of the vest so it fits pretty seamlessly. And I did a ring around the neck so it would, some stabilization and helps with the sculpt. But
Mhm.
I love when a figure has a relief cut so it like, rests on there nice and snug without rubbing. And I
Right.
think I achieved that pretty well. Not bad for my first run at the club part, but yeah, it turned out pretty good.
Right. And then your follow-up was equally as impressive, which is a modified arm for what I this is actually, I guess, using parts from two figures. So the head and the torso is from a female sculpt from Toy Pizza, whereas the limbs are from the Rift Killer mold. But you made this, it's not going to show up like super great on the webcam, but a very cool like color shifting claw.
Yeah, I was just calling it the Rift Claw or the Demon Claw and
Yeah.
my file nomenclature. But yeah, I did it. It's a three-way shift called, I think it's Galaxy Purple
Okay.
or burnt burnt Galaxy Purple, something to that effect through the maker is Flash Forward. It's really, really gorgeous and really sturdy stuff. So I think I matched it pretty well without having any access to the direct color. Jesse had just given me some reference colors in over text I read.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I think it turned out really wicked, and it was super sick to get to do an equipment piece that ties in with my favorite figure from Toy Pizza, which is the Rift Killer.
Yeah.
I think it's like the ultimate bad guy. It's like my version of a Psycho Ranger from Power Rangers. I think they're so sick. So it was really cool. And I love, some evil claw on a bad guy. So it was super sick to get to do that. And to be able to tie in with a new character head sculpt
Right.
on the same figure with Queen Bee was just, it's a dream come true. So, but, the icing on the cake was seeing Renosa, an astounding artist, draw up the hand that I did for the card that came
Hmm.
with it. I mean, my mind just melted when I saw it. So super sick. So as always, Jesse, thank you for letting me play in the sandbox.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me do the card art for that Rex.
Oh yeah, I mean, how could we forget that? What a fantastic. That's your second card slicers card now, right?
Yeah,
Because you have was Sen X your first one?
well, there's Senex, and actually there's another one out there, which is the Zombie Pirate crate, which I had done for another Squire who had I think paid for the custom card art tier.
Oh, right on. I don't think I have one of those. I need to track that down. So I had the trilogy.
Hmm.
Very cool. Very cool.
No, and I think that's a great thing about the Toy Pizza community, is that there's a lot of involvement amongst the fans, and so uh, it's less like you're screaming into the void as it sometimes feels like with maybe some of the larger corporations like Disney or Warner Brothers or Hasbro or Mattel.
Oh,
Not that they
absolutely.
don't have paid teams to, I'm sure, go through social media and brand manage and such, but you know, there's only Jesse on the other end of the line there. So when you talk about Toy Pizza, it's him that's listening.
Well, and I think that's while it's only just him, I think that actually strengthens the conversation point with this, right?
Mhm.
That he's actually going to get back to you. You're going to hear from him, and he's going to do it promptly. Whereas with Hasbro, you're going to get an immediate response, but it's not from a person. It's not from a soul. It's from a droid or an AI algorithm. So and they don't care what you have to say. They're a machine, and I get it. They're designed to make money, but I after attending 413 Fest and seeing everyone's hype around what Onell design was dropping Sunday night when I got home, it's just a very healthy reminder of the ecosystem we're all in and the creativity of a hobby where if you put any amount of effort into this and just try and put forth a good effort and be honest and communicate with the people if you're using their systems and get their blessing, it's like panning for gold. You can make a little bit of money and offset the cost of this. Not a lot of hobbies let you do that. A lot of these are a time and money sink and they're exhaustive. Very rarely do you find a hobby or a group or an ecosystem that is a positive chamber to, resonating chamber to bounce ideas off of and get good feedback and good constructive criticism. Whereas, we could all go set up on a rebel scum in his tank and just get yelled at. We could just do that if we hate ourselves. That can be fun too.
Hmm. Yeah, and like I think there sort of the positive aspects of this hobby can be pulled of, creating community with other people who are into the thing that you're with. So like a good example of that is like on a couple of the discords that we're on, as well as Toy Pizza, we're on another podcast Discord, the Mutagen Men,
Oh,
friends of the pod,
shout out to the Beaudette men. What probably the best toy cast out there.
right? Some
But bar
excellent
none,
historians.
yeah, fantastic. I still eagerly await the episode where Eric just screams into the void about articulated fingers on Toy Biz Marvel Legends. I eagerly await for that. But once they get a Patreon and pay per episode option, whatever Luke Jones wants me to pay, I'll pay for it. So,
But both the Mutagen Men and Toy Pizza have trade threads, and so that's another way to interact with like-minded fans. Cut people a good deal, hook them up with something that they don't find in their region. Brett, you and Derek have great access to Ollie's out where you're at.
right.
I have access to uh, the local vintage toy shop, Has Been Toys here. So I've grabbed a couple things for you, like some old Beast Wars and stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so even if you're not, in your basement huffing plastic fumes or uncured resin, you can still sort of be an active member of the community, helping each other out in that respect.
Yeah, and I understand, we're reaching a critical mass, folks, where this is really expensive. I just talked about how a vintage collection Star Wars is 19.99. They're talking about their 6-inch Black Series is going to be, I think, 27 or 28.99 now. I get it. This stuff is expensive. Everybody needs to make money. And if you're trying to sell parts of your collection, you're trying to get the money to pay for these things. Cut people a deal. Help somebody out because it's more important to make friends with somebody and actually have a human conversation with them than being trying to hose another $5 out of them so you can get that next pre-order in. These things are going on clearance. It's okay. It's okay. Have the human conversation after. That's more important.
Well, and I feel like, of the shops that I've been to where it is run by an individual, like, friend of the pod, Bobby Torres's shop, This Toy Life, back when that was around, other friend of the pod, uh, Has Been Toys, they're there to create a sense of community with their shop because they realize that if you have a positive experience when you come in, you'll be coming back again. And
Right.
so they have a long-term customer versus swindling you once for all your worth. That's
Well, yeah.
ultimately going to get you less.
Well, exactly. And with those places, I'd rather pay the extra $2 or $3 to keep brick and mortar open than giving, Amazon, I'd rather pay the 20 there than give Amazon the 17, right?
Mhm.
And, and that's not to say those places don't have great deals. And more importantly, where else are you going to go find this stuff? I mean, there's only so many times you can doom scroll eBay without getting frustrated about, an 8.95 shipping cost.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, all avenues are valid, but there's other sort of pieces of value in, finding these ways that you can kind of cultivate aspects of the community rather than just the commerce piece of the hobby. But
Right.
both will be present.
Yeah, and I think commerce is important for anybody that's a maker.
Mhm.
Gordon and I are very small time. This is just a hobby for us. This is not our lifeline to keeping the lights on.
Right.
But, I do enjoy making things and seeing, and there is a transaction involved.
Mhm.
But, the joy I get in seeing a child interested in my stuff always leads me to offer charging way less for stuff than I probably could because I want the next gen, like we discussed previously, to be able to afford this stuff and get their hands on it. So then when they're, God willing, they're our age, they're still interested in this stuff and they're not just terminally glued to another screen.
Yeah. And, something that like the few Sotheby pieces that I have, like here's one that's an insane one that I got from a gallery that used to be local to me, that was called Faux, run by a husband and wife couple, Jim and Nicole. And they really introduced me to the entire kind of idea of like toys as art. And
Yeah.
so, I'm used to growing up as a kid going and, getting my American Common Rider figure from KB Toys.
Oh, hell yeah. Look at that. What a piece of art that is.
But this is produced in the like tens of thousands or however many. And I don't, I guess there's a Tampo print on for his little like chest insignia and a couple
Hmm.
stickers. But otherwise, pretty uniform parts manufacturer all assembled together. So this guy looks probably like pretty much everyone else out there. Whereas, the reason that these, especially larger Sotheby figures, cost so much is it's a dude sitting in a sweltering factory pouring molten vinyl into a steel mold, dunking it in a chemical bath, pouring out the excess vinyl, taking a piece of pliers, pulling the vinyl out of the mold, then heating each piece up, cutting it. So like this tongue is one piece. Uh, I think the head is one piece. The like body here is a piece, and then this back and like tail are a piece. So assembling all that, and then, once one of these is assembled, probably sending it off to another dude who uses toxic uh, paint that's airbrushed by hand onto the vinyl toy. And so those paints are chemically formulated so they like bond with the plastic or whatever. Um, but it's a very non-automated process. So it's more like, I think of it, it's actually pretty similar to how traditional Japanese wood block cuts were made, where, an artist would do an illustration, pay another artist to hand carve the block, and then how those prints were made is then another set of artists would, blot on the different colors of inks, press it to the paper, and so yeah, you had a certain level of reproducibility, but they're all a little bit different because it's a human being, going and laying down the pigment on the stamp and stamping it. And so same
Right.
thing of like, and actually, even in Brett or I's pieces, we're running these in super small batches and hand assembling them. And I paint some of my stuff, and so I'm not good enough that I can make them all look identical.
Right. But I think, while you deprecate on yourself saying you're not good enough, I think it lends to the creative pulse of, these ones were hand painted. You're not even using an airbrush. You're taking the time to sit there with a light, with paints, and each one of these is hand painted. Each one has a regularity. That has a soul that something like a factory spray mask doesn't have.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot that can be gleaned from the focusing and interest to that. And I'm not saying people should make this their primary interest because you will probably be let down by only buying independent at some point.
Yeah.
But, if you're not real way into this stuff, dip your toes in it, get involved in it a little bit more. And if you see something you're like, that's a little less than perfect. I really like it like this. Keep in mind, this is somebody doing it in their house or their garage. And they're doing it because they love it, not because they have to. And, once you start looking at it, wow, this person really cares about this enough to do this by themselves, for themselves first and foremost, that is way cooler to me than seeing something that is just meticulous and perfect. When it's perfect, it's not interesting.
Yeah, and I think if you spend enough time looking at a piece, that comes through. Like you can tell that Brett and I love doing this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
uh, I feel like that's true of a lot of other smaller makers. Whereas if it's a screen accurate, digitally scanned likeness of a Hollywood actor, um, I mean, that's cool from like a technological standpoint, but
Sure.
uh,
Absolutely.
that it loses some of the individual craftsmanship.
No, I agree with that completely. I think that if you could definitely see it as like a technological gain, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is really fantastic what they're able to do. But there is kind of the uncanny valley with it. Like I picked up the newest Han Solo. It is kind of unnerving how much it looks like Harrison Ford in my pocket. And I think that's really great. But then there's part of me, it's like, man, this something about this just isn't right.
And so what I love doing is like, taking a mass-produced figure, like here's a Bandai Kamen Rider or something, and
Right.
then putting it up next to one of my guys, like this Mantessa figure, which was, my sort of take on a Kaijin or a like enemy bad guy from Kamen Rider. And so
Hmm.
yeah, this doesn't have the incredible engineering of the people at Bandai or like the factory produced paint, but I almost kind of like the contrast of this, of like the kind of weirder, rough look of the homemade stuff next to the factory produced premium stuff.
Yeah. And I think, circling back to that uncanny valley statement, I just wanted to say there's a really great conversation with fellow maker and friend of the pod, Adam Crone of AC Toy Design,
Oh
with
yeah, I
him
bet.
and the Craftsman Steady Craft, and he did a few years ago now for his 100th episode.
Mhm.
And they were talking about modern action figures and the old Kenner stuff. And they even talked a little bit about some of the Power of the Force 2 stuff. And I'm paraphrasing here, and I don't want to completely misquote Adam, but he said something to the effect of, when they look so real, it doesn't leave anything left for us. And Gordon and I talked about that a little bit over the weekend. That I'm so invested in old 8-bit RPGs on Game Boy,
Yeah.
that I love the sprite art or the old art that you would see in Final Fantasy stuff or Pokemon. When it fully gets translated to 3D, you don't get that personalization of the imagination. And I think you get a lot of that with these indie made stuff, that stuff like Gordon and I are doing, or even some of these vinyl we saw this weekend,
Yeah.
or if you look at the stuff that Derek of DSN 1014 is putting out, with his figures, his great detail and great sculpts, but he might not fully paint everything. He might just do a wash on a face, and you can kind of fill in the gaps of how this would work because he's only 5P away. Or something like, friend of the pod, Brandon of Divine Surface putting out with Reaver,
Yeah.
while his stuff, he has a very certain aesthetic for Reaver in that sculpt. You can kind of see how this thing might move and how heavy he's going to have when he's running. When you have 35 POA and articulated wrists that swivel like acid rain, yeah, it looks cool and you can pose it awesome, but there's no imagination left in it, at least for me. I
Mhm.
always like to feel it, how would he move? How would it do this? When you don't have those and you might have a pre-pose there, you can kind of glean how that character would work.
No, and back to another friend of ours, friend of the pod, Ken West, his short
Yes.
films that he manages to do
Oh
with
man.
the 5POA, like Knights of the Slice stuff, is incredible. And it's sort of in that interesting space between like a stop motion film with puppets, and then a little bit like a kid. Or like the old toy commercials, where like Batman would smash through the the wall of
Right.
lucite blocks of like
Right.
Michael Keaton isn't doing that in the movie,
No,
but
heavens no.
that's like totally how all the kids were playing with the Michael Keaton figures of Batman on the playground is just like, busting through walls of stuff, shooting insane oversized like bat missiles
Oh,
at
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And man, what a multi-talent Kenneth is. He can do anything. He
yeah.
really can.
We'll have
We
to
have to get,
get him. Yeah.
yeah, keep an eye out for that conversation, folks. But yeah, what a powerhouse. And just every time I've talked to him, just the nicest guy.
Mhm.
Truly a wizard if there ever was one.
But I feel like it's a great visualization of sort of that imaginative play that I remember doing as a kid of your brain fills in the gaps of okay, we're on the kitchen table with Skeletor and Optimus Prime because I don't
Right.
own the other figure from the line, but these guys are fighting now, I guess, and the coffee mugs are concrete pillars and like you're using whatever you can to kind of as props. It's a stage play. And so it's not meant to be a one-to-one to reality. Things are representational. And then your imagination is left to do the work.
Right. And I think when you leave that little bit of space there for that adventure and you're having fun again. And I
Mhm.
think there's not a lot of fun in the hobby. So when we have pivoted to making, we get to explore some of that again, and then it informs how we look at everything.
Right.
So I think that's a really healthy way to go about it and look at it, and especially seeing how creative some people are, like Ocular Rhombus Toys, who was at the show, who I
Yeah.
I did a show with over the spring for the launch of one of my figures for his Robot Rebellion. He did really fun show, really great guy to talk to. What an absolute mad wizard of creativity. But the stuff he's doing with his more art toy resin art figures that are on a card with a blister, the stuff he's doing really informs that sense of, oh, I really got to take a look at this from another angle because this is something that is different and unique and I haven't seen.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of stuff where there's too much of the regurgitation. And, I think we're coming up on this conversation just turning into me hating everything that's new
Oh,
and that's being put up by big makers.
I mean, you're the
But
resident dad.
yeah, this is turning into Uncle Hour. But, I think we can see that there is clearly, just from me and Gordon alone, there's clearly some vacancy in this space that we're trying to fill. And I think a lot of other people can do that too. And if they're feeling, oh, I can't do it, I don't have the wherewithal, I don't have the patience, I don't have the space, just start drawing.
Mhm.
Just start drawing. Send us drawings. Send
Yeah.
anybody that we're meant, and if it's not us, somebody we've mentioned some drawings and see what they can help you with.
Mhm. yeah, and find friends to draw with. Like how I got started, with this creative stuff is drawing drawings in the margins of my notebooks and then showing them to the friends at school. And like that little bit of encouragement is kind of what gets you to stick with it and, just keep honing your skill. You kind of work out what you're into. Um, and certainly that's been a great thing with between me and Brett is we're able to kind of act as sounding boards and uh, sharpen each other their skills, sort of gas each other up about different insane ideas.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think I would have pursued a giant 6-inch articulated robot had Gordon and I been talking. If it wasn't for Gordon, I definitely wouldn't have pursued half of these robot ideas I've put out. That's not to say that I haven't put out giant stuff before, but I definitely wouldn't have done one with through swapping arms, and then I'm sending him color ideas that I have, and then he's bouncing other ones to me, and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? That's brilliant.
Mhm.
So, finding a good group to really get in there with is important. So, I think the takeaway from this episode is just community. And I think
Mhm.
that's probably what we're gonna would probably be the show title. So, feel free to clip this and that'll just get my voice going community at the beginning of the episode. But
Yeah,
we
I'll
get
come.
we have to get our soundboard ready.
Right. I feel like I don't know, we've been going for about an hour, so that was there anything else that you wanted to touch on about the 413 show, or stuff that we sort of rapped
Um,
about this weekend?
Not anything I can think of. I just want to anybody listening that was at the show, I just want to express my deepest gratitude for picking something up, stopping by to say hi. And that fantastic wrestler we met, Perry
Oh,
Vicious, I
Paragon
believe is his
Vicious,
name,
yeah.
and he had stopped by and said, "Hey, I listened to your show, and I'm a wrestler that makes my own toys and sells them." And I was just like, "This how first of all, how fantastic of a human being to come by and just talk to us, but to hear that we had a listener out in the wild that's someone we don't talk to in our like deep forest communities,
Right.
it just made my day.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for stopping by to say hey. And we absolutely need to collab with one of your figures in like our goofy little projects. So definitely but yeah, thank you so much for stopping by. That was awesome. And thanks to everybody that came by and grabbed something from me and Gordon and thanks to all of the other creatives that are, podcasting, doing geek shit that we're interested in. Thanks to Jesse of Toy Pizza, Matt of Onell Design, the Mutagen Men. Thanks for putting out these things for me to listen to on my trek up to Gordon's neck of the woods. So, listening to that stuff really keeps my fire ignited when I'm headed up on a project event like this for a festival. So thank you guys.
Yeah. And thanks to our sponsors at Super 7, and you can use Brett's affiliate link that I'll put in the description to get cool shit like this is the Black Falcon Ultimates
That's
from
right.
Super 7's line of original characters, the worst. So
Yes.
I would personally recommend this. This is a super cool figure. Goes great with my cursed armor dudes,
Yeah.
about the
And
same
like
scale.
exactly. And like I had just bitched incessantly about for the past hour, like a nefarious uncle, where there is new ideas at Super 7. It might not
Yeah.
seem like it. Buy the stuff from the worst and the weirdest. Get that stuff. That stuff is so fun and so cool and so strange and it's playable.
Mhm.
Like get that stuff. Use my affiliate link get this show a little bit of money so we can get some other sponsors. And more importantly, the more you guys pick up through me, I can start to give you guys discounts, which is super helpful for everybody involved. But buy that cool stuff. Don't buy a Ninja Turtle. Obviously pre-order every G.I. Joe reaction ever made through me, please. But, quit buying the turtles, buy the weirdest, buy the goofy shit. That's what I got to say about that.
And one other plug that I'll put in is, our other friend of the pod, David White, has done a lot of good work for Super 7. So one of my favorite pieces that I have is his Robot Man for the Reaction Plus Micronauts. He also did the Baron Karza. Um,
Yeah. And those are
and
super sick.
yeah, and like what a guy to have work on this. Given his independent work with his own designs, the Mechanauts, which were his love letter to Micronauts. Like, I can't think of a better dude to have had on
No,
the Micronauts reaction line.
no question. No, no. If there was a human being in this country to work on it, it was David.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it was David White. And if you guys aren't familiar with that, check out MechaZone on Instagram.
Mhm.
He's no longer producing his own figures, but he's got his hands all over the stuff Super Seven's been doing, and he's got a few figures on Big Bad through. For the life of me, I don't remember.
52 toys, I think.
Yes, 52 toys. It's not the Beast Box line, but it was something else. It's some of his robot sculpts. They're very sick stuff. So check those out. But yeah, David White, friend of the pod, great human being, a fantastic artist, and check out some of the stuff that he did with Super 7 in the hopes that he gets more work to keep working with them.
Yeah.
We want people that are interested in doing the work, not people that see this as a paycheck. And
Mhm.
David is one of the best creatives out there.
Yeah, and I'll also try to remember to post the link to David's Patreon. He is a true
Oh my God.
Renaissance man,
Yeah, absolutely.
developing his own Sega Genesis game by
Yep.
himself. Uh,
Gilgamesh.
right. So check that out as well. Uh, these people are doing this work out of kind of the love of the game, and so it does show through. And so, Brett and I want to see them continuing to make cool shit, and that we hope people out there will be inspired to make their own cool shit.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's a good wrap. As always, you can find me at Vladimir the Badimir on Instagram, and Brett, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Aegis Station on Instagram, and you can find me at aegisbazaar.bigcartel.com. Keep an eye out here, I don't know, in the next hour or so. I'm going to be putting up some show leftovers of Gordon's figures on my site and a couple of the Oozclops leftovers. And keep an eye out for the Orbix launch later this month. So thanks for listening, folks.
Hell yeah. Catch you guys next time.